the strategic road to Leyte competing visions and the American decision to advance by the late summer of 1944. The United States' relentless island-hopping campaign across the Pacific had brought its formidable naval and amphibious forces within striking distance of the Japanese-occupied Philippine archipelago. The strategic value of the Philippines was immense for both sides. For Imperial Japan, the islands were a crucial linchpin in its defensive perimeter, providing vital raw materials and serving as the essential conduit for oil shipments from the captured territories of the Dutch East Indies to the home islands. For the United States, their liberation was a moral and strategic imperative. The American High Command, however, was divided on the best approach. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, favored a more direct thrust toward Formosa, Taiwan, or the Japanese home islands themselves, bypassing the Philippines to accelerate the war's end. Opposing this view was General Douglas MacArthur, the Supreme Commander of Allied forces in the Southwest Pacific area, who was adamant about fulfilling his famous 1942 pledge, "I shall return," to the Filipino people. For MacArthur, the campaign was about more than military strategy. It was a matter of national honor, personal redemption, and fulfilling a solemn promise. His plan called for an initial landing on the island of Mindanao, followed by a seizure of Leyte as a stepping stone to the main island of Luzon and the capital, Manila. The debate was resolved in MacArthur's favor in the summer of 1944, but the operational timeline was dramatically accelerated due to a pivotal reconnaissance discovery. In September, Admiral William Bull Halsey's powerful Task Force 38, a fast carrier strike force, launched a series of punishing air raids across the Philippines. These attacks revealed that Japanese air power in the region, particularly around Mindanao, was far weaker than intelligence had estimated. Halsey, sensing a critical vulnerability, urgently recommended to the Joint Chiefs of Staff that the planned December invasion of Leyte be moved forward to October. The Joint Chiefs agreed, compressing months of logistical planning into a few hectic weeks. This rapid shift, while a testament to American operational flexibility, introduced significant risks and command complexities. The invasion fleet, under Vice Admiral Thomas Kinkaid's 7th Fleet, would consist primarily of slower amphibious vessels, older battleships resurrected from Pearl Harbor, and light escort carrier ships designed for anti-submarine warfare and close air support, not fleet-to-fleet combat. With the approaching monsoon season threatening to ground land-based air cover, MacArthur insisted that Halsey's 3rd Fleet, with its modern fast carriers and battleships, provide overarching protection and air superiority. Nimitz agreed but issued Halsey a critical, and fatefully ambiguous, order. His primary mission was to cover the landings, but in case opportunity for destruction of major portion of the enemy fleet is offered or can be created, such destruction becomes the primary task. This directive, and the fractured command structure that kept MacArthur and Kinkaid largely in the dark about Halsey's potential independent actions, would set the stage for one of the most dramatic and controversial chapters in naval history. Meanwhile, the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters, fully aware that the Philippines were the likely next American target, activated their grand counterstroke plan, Surigao Operation Victory. The Philippine Plan, Show-1*, was a desperate and complex gamble born of necessity. Japanese naval and air strength had been catastrophically eroded in earlier battles like the Philippine Sea, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, leaving them with a severe shortage of aircraft and, most critically, experienced pilots. Despite this, they still possessed formidable surface combatants, including the world's largest battleships, Yamato and Musashi. The Show-1* plan relied on luring the powerful U.S. carrier forces away from the invasion site, a decoy force centered on Japan's few remaining carriers, now lacking effective air groups, would bait Halsey's 3rd Fleet north. Once the American carriers were drawn off, 2 powerful surface action groups would converge on Leyte Gulf from the west. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's formidable center force, including the Yamato and Musashi, would transit the San Bernardino Strait, while a smaller southern force, under Vice Admirals Shoshi Nishimura and Kiyohide Shima, would attack through the Surigao Strait. The plan was audacious, requiring precise timing and coordination across vast distance. It's a tall order for a fleet hamstrung by fuel shortages and the deep-seated institutional rivalry between the Imperial Japanese Army and Navy, which hampered unified command. Most Japanese officers involved viewed the plan with profound pessimism, seeing it not as a realistic path to victory, but as an opportunity for the fleet to die honorably in a final, decisive battle. The prelude air battles over Formosa and the fleets converge. The opening moves of the Leyte campaign occurred not at sea, but in the skies over Formosa, Taiwan, in mid-October 1944. As a prelude to the invasion, Halsey's Task Force 38 launched massive air raids against Japanese air bases on Formosa to neutralize any threat to the approaching invasion convoy. What ensued was one of the largest air battles of the Pacific War. The Japanese, interpreting these attacks as the main American offensive, committed nearly all their operational aircraft in the region, including reserves earmarked for the show operations. For several days, the skies were filled with swirling dogfights. The qualitative gap between the adversaries was stark. American pilots, battle-hardened, and flying superior aircraft, like the F-6F Hellcat, decimated the inexperienced Japanese aviators. One Japanese air commander, Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome, somberly noted, "Our fighters were nothing but so many eggs thrown at the stone wall of the indomitable enemy formation." Despite overwhelming American aerial dominance, the Japanese scored a few painful hits. Aerial torpedoes crippled the heavy cruisers USS Canberra and USS Houston, forcing them to be towed from the battle area. Eager to capitalize on this apparent success, Japanese headquarters wildly overclaimed, announcing the destruction of multiple American carrier groups, a fiction that bolstered morale at home but dangerously misinformed their own commanders. In reality, the cost was catastrophic for Japan: over 500 aircraft lost, irreplaceable pilots killed, and the air groups for the upcoming naval battle effectively annihilated. The damaged American cruisers were even used as bait in a failed attempt to lure out a Japanese surface force, a ruse that revealed Japanese caution. As the Formosa air battle subsided, the immense American invasion armada, over 700 ships strong, steamed unimpeded toward Leyte. On October 17, 1944, advanced units began landing on the small islands guarding Leyte Gulf. The Japanese High Command, now certain of American intentions, formally activated ****. The great chess pieces of the Imperial Japanese Navy Kurita's mighty center force and Brunei Nishimura's southern force and Ozawa's northern decoy force from Japan began to move, setting in motion a series of engagements that would span over 100,000 square miles of ocean. Back in the American camp, the fractured command structure began to show its strains. Admiral Kinkaid, commanding the 7th Fleet Invasion Force, operated under General MacArthur's Southwest Pacific Command. Admiral Halsey's 3rd Fleet reported to Admiral Nimitz at Pacific Fleet Headquarters in Pearl Harbor. While mutual support was expected, there was no single naval commander on site. Kinkaid assumed Halsey's fast battleships were guarding the vital San Bernardino Strait against Kurita's possible approach. Halsey, meanwhile, viewed his role more aggressively, seeing his primary target as the enemy's carrier force, wherever it might be. This ambiguity, coupled with overloaded and sometimes misdirected radio communications, would lead to a perilous misunderstanding. As the first American soldiers waded ashore on Leyte on October 20, 1944, to MacArthur's dramatic staged landing and radio announcement, "People of the Philippines, I have returned." The stage was set, the Japanese fleets were converging, and Halsey's scouts were searching for the enemy's main strength. The battle would unfold not as a single clash, but as for nearly simultaneous and interconnected actions: the Battle of the Sibuyan Sea, the Battle of Surigao Strait, the Battle off Samar, and the Battle off Cape Ngao. Together, they would constitute the Battle of Leyte Gulf. The battles of the Sibuyan Sea and Surigao Strait the opening blows. On October 23, 1944, the Battle of Leyte Gulf erupted with a fierce, largely unseen struggle beneath the waves. In the Palawan Passage, 2 American submarines, the Darter and Dace, lay in ambush for Vice Admiral Kurita's center force. In a stunning and sudden strike, the submarines sank to heavy cruisers, including Kurita's flagship Otago, and heavily damaged a third. Kurita barely survived, forced to abandon his ship and transfer command amid the chaos. Despite this shocking setback, the Japanese admiral pressed on. The following day, October 24, Kurita's force pushed into the Sibuyan Sea on its course toward the San Bernardino Strait. There, Halsey's Task Force 38 launched waves of relentless air attacks, targeting the massive Japanese battleship Musashi, sister ship to the Yamato. Pilots unleashed torrents of bombs and torpedoes. Yet the Musashi displayed remarkable resilience, taking repeated hits while her crew fought courageously. The battleship even fired her enormous 18.1-inch main guns, loaded with special anti-aircraft shells, producing dazzling but largely ineffective explosions in the air. After enduring more than a dozen torpedo and bomb strikes, the Musashi finally succumbed late in the day, sinking with roughly half of her 2,400-strong crew. Its destruction was both symbolic and tragic. A legendary warship had perished without ever firing its main guns in anger. Other vessels in Kurita's formation sustained damage, prompting him to temporarily turn westward. American pilots, observing this maneuver, assumed the center force was retreating and transmitted optimistic reports to Halsey. In reality, the attacks had been heavily focused on the Musashi, leaving Yamato and most of Kurita's remaining ships battle-ready. Once night fell and the airstrikes ended, Kurita reversed course once more, quietly resuming his advance toward the San Bernardino Strait. Meanwhile, Halsey, confident that Kurita's force posed no threat, redirected the full might of 3rd Fleet, including all fast carriers and modern battleships, northward to engage Vice Admiral Gisaburo Ozawa's northern force, Japan's last remaining carrier fleet. Critically, he left the San Bernardino Strait unguarded and failed to provide clear, direct instructions to Admiral Kinkaid of the 7th Fleet. While Kurita maneuvered in the Sibuyan Sea, the southern arm of the Japanese plan met utter destruction at the Surigao Strait during the night of October 24–25. Vice Admiral Jesse Oldendorf executed a textbook naval ambush. The historic crossing the T maneuver, as Vice Admiral Nishimura's force entered the narrow strait. They were met by an array of American PT boats, destroyers, and cruisers, culminating in a line of 6 battleships, 5, resurrected from the mud of Pearl Harbor. In the ensuing carnage, American destroyers launched devastating torpedo strikes, sinking the battleship Fuso and several accompanying vessels. The surviving Japanese ships then faced the full broadsides of Oldendorf's battle line, battleships West Virginia, Tennessee, and California. Their Pearl Harbor scars now avenged, unleashed a furious barrage of radar-guided 16-inch shells, obliterating Yamashiro and leaving few survivors. Vice Admiral Shima's trailing squadron arrived too late, witnessed the destruction, and wisely withdrew after a brief, ineffective exchange. The Battle of Surigao Strait marked a decisive and total American victory, the final battleship versus battleship engagement in naval history. Confident that the southern threat was neutralized, Kinkaid and Oldendorf focused their forces on supporting the troops landing on Leyte. Yet, unbeknownst to them, the greater danger loomed from the north, through the unguarded San Bernardino Strait, as Kurita's center force stealthily continued its advance. The battle off Samar, desperate valor, and a pivotal decision at dawn on October 25, 1944. Off the island of Samar, the war's most improbable and dramatic surface engagement began. As Admiral Kinkaid's 7th Fleet tended to the invasion, its most vulnerable elements were 3 small groups of escort carriers, known by their radio calcines Taffy 1, Taffy 2, and Taffy 3. These jeep carriers, converted from merchant hulls, were slow, thin-skinned, and armed for anti-submarine patrol and ground support, not fleet combat. Their screen consisted of a handful of destroyers and destroyer escorts. Taffy 3, under Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague, was on routine patrol when lookouts sighted the pagoda-like masts of large warships on the horizon. To their horror, it was the entirety of Kurita's Center Force 4 battleships, including the monstrous Yamato, 6 heavy cruisers, and numerous destroyers emerging from the San Bernardino Strait, which they had found undefended. The mismatch was almost comical, the world's most powerful surface fleet versus a group of baby flat-tops and their tiny escorts. Kurita, equally surprised and mistaking the escort carriers for Halsey's fast fleet carriers, immediately ordered a general attack, seeking to close and destroy them with gunfire before they could launch aircraft. What followed was an hour and a half of breathtaking courage and chaos that defied all conventional military logic. Clifton Sprague reacted with instant, defiant resolve. He turned his carriers east into the wind to launch aircraft, ordered all planes armed with whatever they had, even depth charges, into the air, and made smoke. He then did the unthinkable. He ordered his outgunned destroyers and destroyer escorts to launch a suicidal torpedo charge against the Japanese battle line. The small American ships, like the USS Johnston DD 557 under Commander Ernest Evans, raced into the jaws of the enemy. Evans, a Native American officer who had sworn, "If we ever get into a real shoot and scrape, we'll show him what we can do," lived up to his word. The Johnston scored a torpedo hit on a heavy cruiser, peppered a battleship with its 5-inch guns, and dodged salvos for over an hour before succumbing to overwhelming fire. The destroyer USS Hull and destroyer escort USS Samuel B. Roberts performed with similar legendary heroism, attacking until they were shot to pieces. Their sacrifice was not in vain. They threw the Japanese formation into confusion, drew fire away from the carriers, and bought precious time. Overhead, a motley collection of American aircraft fighters, bombers, torpedo planes conducted continuous, desperate attacks, strafing bridges and making dry runs to distract gunners. The American carriers, though fragile, proved surprisingly resilient. Japanese armor-piercing shells often passed clean through their unarmored hulls without exploding. Miraculously, none were immediately sunk by gunfire, though several, like the USS Gambier Bay, were crippled and later lost. The sheer frenzied aggression of the American defense convinced Kurita he was facing a far stronger force than he actually was. His communications were poor, his formation was scattered by the relentless, harassing attacks, and he believed powerful American reinforcements were imminent. After nearly 2.5 hours of close combat, at the very moment when victory over Taffy 3 seemed assured, Kurita made the controversial decision to break off the action, citing the need to regroup and a growing fear of concentrated air attacks, unaware that Halsey was hundreds of miles away. He ordered his fleet to withdraw north through the San Bernardino Strait. The invasion transports in Leyte Gulf, the ultimate objective of Show 1*, lay utterly exposed just a few hours' sail away. But Kurita turned his back on them. The miracle off Samar was secured by the incredible bravery of the American sailors and aviators of Taffy 3. Almost immediately after Kurita's withdrawal, a new horror descended on the surviving American ships, the first organized kamikaze, divine wind suicide attacks of the war. sinking the escort carrier, USS St. Lo, and introducing a terrifying new phase of the Pacific conflict. The battle off Cape Ngago and the birth of the Kamikaze, while the drama off Samar unfolded. The final act of the complex battle was playing out to the north. Off Cape Ngago, Admiral Halsey's Third Fleet had finally closed in on Ozawa's decoy northern force. Just as the Japanese had hoped, Halsey had taken the bait. On the morning of October 25, American scout planes located Ozawa's force, which included the fleet carrier Zuikaku, the last survivor of the Pearl Harbor attack, and 3 light carriers, all with barely a couple dozen aircraft between them. For Halsey, this was the decisive fleet engagement he sought. He launched over 500 sorties in a series of overwhelming attacks. The result was a foregone conclusion. With minimal air cover, Ozawa's ships were sitting ducks. The Zuikaku, shrouded in smoke and listing heavily after multiple bomb and torpedo hits, went down flying her battle ensign. 3 light carriers followed her to the bottom. It was a tactical triumph, the annihilation of Japan's last carrier force. However, as the attacks proceeded, desperate pleas for help began to arrive from 7th Fleet at Samar. Halsey's subordinates were aghast. The great battle to the north was a trap, and the real crisis was to the south. After a delay that felt like an eternity to Kinkaid's men, Halsey detached part of his force to race south, but it was too late to intercept Kurita. The battle off Cape Ngago, though a clear American victory, was thus tinged with frustration and controversy. Halsey had destroyed the empty symbol of Japanese naval air power, but had left the invasion force perilously exposed to its still potent surface fleet. The controversy over his decision would rage for decades. The Battle of Leyte Gulf also marked the ominous institutionalization of a new Japanese tactic born of desperation: the Kamikaze special attack. With conventional air power shattered, Japanese commanders like Vice Admiral Tokijiro Onishi concluded that only suicide attacks, where the plane itself was the guided missile, could achieve the accuracy needed to inflict significant damage. The first organized kamikaze unit was formed in the Philippines in October 1944. The psychological impact on Allied sailors was profound, as the sight of a plane intentionally diving into a ship represented a frightening escalation in fanaticism. While initially effective as seen with the sinking of the St. Lo, Allied countermeasures, including improved combat air patrols, radar picket screens, and the devastating new proximity-fused anti-aircraft shells, would eventually blunt their toll. Nevertheless, the Kamikaze campaign signified Japan's grim transition to a strategy of national suicide, aiming not for victory, but for a cost so bloody it might force a negotiated peace. Aftermath, analysis, and historical legacy. The Battle of Leyte Gulf concluded as a colossal American victory and the effective end of the Imperial Japanese Navy as a strategic fighting force. Japanese losses were catastrophic. For aircraft carriers, 3 battleships, including the Musashi, 10 cruisers, and 11 destroyers, sunk, along with over 10,000 sailors and aviators killed. The Americans lost 3 light carriers to 2 kamikazes, 2 destroyers, a destroyer escort, and several other vessels, with about 3,000 casualties. Strategically, the American victory secured the beachhead at Leyte, allowing MacArthur's ground campaign to proceed. The Japanese fleet would never again mount a major offensive operation. The battle, however, was immediately shrouded in controversy, centering on Admiral Halsey's decision to take his entire fleet north. His critics, including many fellow officers, accused him of falling for an obvious decoy and jeopardizing the entire invasion for personal glory. His defenders pointed to Nimitz's ambiguous orders and the compelling doctrine of seeking out and destroying the enemy's main carrier force. The fragmented Allied command structure, which divided authority between MacArthur and Nimitz, was also rightly criticized as a contributing factor to the near disaster off Samar. Historians have since debated whether Kurita, had he pressed his advantage at Samar, could have reached Leyte Gulf and slaughtered the transports. Most conclude that while he might have caused a logistical catastrophe, it would have been a Pyrrhic and ultimately futile act. His fleet, low on fuel and under constant air attack, would have been trapped and annihilated in the confined waters of the Gulf by returning American air power, likely from both Halsey and land-based aircraft. The Japanese plan itself, show 1*, was fundamentally flawed, requiring a level of coordination and good fortune that was impossible given Allied strength and Japanese weakness. It was a final, desperate throw of the dice by a navy already doomed by industrial inferiority and lost battles of attrition. For the United States, Leyte Gulf was a testament to industrial might, operational resilience, and, at Samar, unparalleled individual heroism. It validated the Fast Carrier Task Force as the dominant instrument of naval power and demonstrated that even in the face of a catastrophic command error, the initiative, training, and courage of American sailors and aviators could snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. The battle cleared the way for the liberation of the Philippines, which became a brutal, protracted ground campaign. More broadly, it opened the direct path to Iwo Jima, Okinawa, and the final assaults planned on the Japanese home islands. The Battle of Leyte Gulf thus stands not only as the largest naval battle in history, but as the definitive engagement that broke Japanese sea power and decided the course of the Pacific War.